Well, Jill, it is great to have you here on the Voice of Influence podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. You have an interesting story about your company and kind of how it came about. Would you share with us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I come from the food and beverage industry. I am a registered dietitian. I have a master's in food science and nutrition. And 6.5 years ago, I found myself in cannabis and looking at the cannabis industry. I had a very specific understanding of kill steps and how to ensure consumer goods are safe for all types of consumers. And so when I was pivoting out of a cold pressed juice company that I owned and I sold that, I was looking at cannabis, and it was early days in Colorado, early days in terms of legalization. And when I was looking at the requirements for cultivators and what the state was expecting in terms of testing for pathogens, so mold, yeast, E. coli, salmonella, they were testing for
All
these.
very important.
Yes, yeah, of course. They were testing for these really important pathogens. But if a cultivator was presented with them during the growing cycle, there was no solution to get rid of them to ensure that they passed testing, but most importantly, that the consumers were protected. And so I kind of had this wild idea, and I invented a kill step for the cannabis industry.
Wow, a wild idea. Okay, so that is pretty forward thinking. It's just an interesting connection between your juice business and where you ended up going next. Do you typically see problems like this and just jump on them and seize the moment? Or do you have do you go through some sort of process of figuring out what to do when it comes to solving a business problem like this?
That's a really great question. And I think some people would have wished that I had more of a process, but I'm the entrepreneur that literally it's like, I have an idea and I'm like, oh, of course, I'm just going to go execute. That just makes total sense. That is exactly what I did with my juice business. I did a ton of research, but was getting a master's in nutrition anyway. So I was already doing all of that. But with my juice business, I was kind of ahead of the curve and the trend in terms of juice cleanses and direct to consumer. And I was the same way with Willow and what we do here with a kill step. But no, I had no data. I was just like, this is an amazing idea. It's way ahead of its time, but I'm going to do it. And so I just did it.
Well, that's one of the benefits of it becoming legalized, because then you can regulate it. So I'm sure there was a lot of concern around just health and the quality of the product.
There was, but what's interesting is, the state regulators were essentially inventing this up as they went, right? Because there wasn't a playbook. Yeah. There is a playbook for food and beverage. Like, they know what to do to ensure that your product does not have salmonella. They don't know what to do to ensure that cannabis doesn't have salmonella or mold or yeast. So they took a very strict look at the plant and said, okay, we're going to test for these things, and it's going to have a low threshold for testing. And we have to make sure the consumer is safe, just because we don't know a lot. Mm-hmm. So I think that's been a big challenge in this industry, is that we don't know a lot. And so we've kind of had to invent it up as we go.
Which is kind of exciting for people that are entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
Okay. So would you share with us a little bit of the process of how you figured out what to do to cleanse the product?
Absolutely. So I looked at what was used in food and beverage. A lot of the methods that are traditionally used for consumer goods weren't applicable for cannabis. Heat, for instance, that was going to destroy the cannabis. So I kind of started looking outside of traditional kill steps. And I went down the road of high pressure pasteurization. Well, that was an absolute disaster. It totally destroyed the flower. I was like, okay, well, I have to go back to the drawing board. So I kept looking, and I found ozone gas. Now, ozone gas has traditionally been used in agriculture and in produce and some food products. And I was like, well, that's interesting. It's a gas, so it wouldn't destroy the plant. And so I worked with a contract ozone company in the very beginning to get some early R&D. The results were very promising. And I was like, all right, great, I'm on my way. And then turns out I had a lot more to learn.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm sure it was a bit of a process. Well, can you tell us a little bit about the growth of your company? Like at what point did you start bringing on other people? Have you taken investors, that sort of thing?
So when I started this 6.5 years ago, it was just me. I had an early employee come with me from my juice business there. And my husband, who was working in the finance industry at the time, essentially bankrolled the company. It's not like we had a ton of money. He put a little bit of money in from, one of his investment accounts. Or really I was like, you have to do this. You have to put your money in.
So that was the investment that you took.
Yeah. I was like, I have this a great idea. It's really ahead of its time, but I think we can do this. And again, we were so early. So it was really hard. In the beginning, no one wanted to talk to us in cannabis. They didn't know who I was. They didn't know what this technology was going to do to their flower. So it took a really long time. Some early adopters in Colorado were wonderful for us. They helped us get a ton of R&D. And then we brought on institutional capital in 2019. We closed $2 million and pivoted from selling our systems to leasing our systems. So now we have a recurring revenue model. And that kind of changed the trajectory of the company. We were able to start leasing our systems outside of Colorado. So now we're in 26 states. We're in Australia. We lease our equipment all over the country to cultivators of every size, small to large multi-state operators, and just closed our Series A. So, we have a team of 23 now. But, 6 years ago, it was me. It was just me.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
You mentioned that your husband that he was bankrolling the business at the time, but now it looks like he is a part of the business. Would you tell us a little bit about how you decided to have him come on board and how that works for the two of you running a company together?
Well, the intention was always to have him come work at Willow. Of course, him being the first investor was really helpful, but he seriously had to keep his day job. So we couldn't, do this right off the bat together, but the intention was always there. Then about 2 years after we had launched, the company was starting to make money because we were selling the systems. So he was able to leave his job and join Willow full time. So now he's been doing this with us for almost 5 years, I believe. And, it's been incredible to build this company with him, but building anything with your partner or significant other, it's hard. There are many, many hard times. I mean, we really had to understand how each other worked outside of our marriage, and start to really compartmentalizing our marriage and our work life. We saw executive coaches to kind of help us through some of the harder times that we went through. But I think what makes it work incredibly well is we have very different skill sets. I am the visionary. I am the face of the company. I, have the ideas, and then he literally takes my ideas and then puts them into action. He's a finance guy, true and true. So he really, kept me on a tight leash in the beginning in terms of spending money. And, through COVID, we actually got to cash flow positive last year. So, I mean, he's an incredible operator, and he is our chief operating officer. So it works well. But now we have a really good dynamic. It took some time to get there.
Sure.
But it's really good now.
So at this point, do you have like clear boundaries between work and home life, or do you have a way of weaving it together that you feel good about? Where are you at with that?
I think now that the company has gotten so much bigger and there's just a lot happening at all times, we really try to stop working and stop talking about work once we leave the office. We both come to the office every day. Our whole team works from our offices. So we have a very clear boundary between here's work and then here's home. And we really try very hard to not blend the two. But then of course, sometimes at dinner, we're like, can you believe this? Or what about this? I forgot to ask you about this. But other time, I'd say most of the time we're good about not talking about work at home, because then there's no stopping.
Yeah,
and it's
sure.
just exhausting.
And I heard, I listened to another podcast that you were on, and it sounded like you have a daughter. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yeah. 5-year-old. Yeah.
A 5-year-old. Okay. So you started the company how long ago? Like this is
I
like the
know.
timing of all this, I'm sure was really interesting for you.
It was, we actually got married. I came up with the idea when we got back from our honeymoon, literally the day we got back from our honeymoon. So then I just like jump in, right? And then I got pregnant and, I was in cultivations with this huge ozone machine, 7 months pregnant. So our kid has been part of Willow's evolution pretty much the whole time.
Mm. I mean, it's exciting. It's encouraging, I'm sure, for other women to hear that you were able to do both. But I mean, what are some of the benefits and what are some of the difficulties of trying to, raise a small child at the same time as raising a small company?
The benefits are that, I it's my company, so I kind of come and go as I please. Although, I'm very dedicated, so I'm here all day, every day. But I do have flexibility. I can leave to pick her up. I can leave. She's very close to our offices. So I can see her as much as I need to. I would say one of the difficulties is on the other side, I work a lot, so I don't see her as much as I would like to. We have a small amount of time in the morning and then a small amount of time at night. But I really believe I'm showing her how, a badass woman can like make it work and, and try to be an inspiration that way. But I mean, the work-life balance is hard. And I really try to focus on the weekends, on her and our family, instead of letting work blend into that. I've gotten much better over the years.
Okay. You started out actually in the entertainment industry, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you made an interesting shift, like on a dime from what it sounded like. And this is really interesting to me because sometimes I work with people who are trying to decide whether or not they're going to stick something out or make a move. And I I think sometimes people get stuck in that idea that I can prove myself or I just need to, if I solve this problem, if I fix this, then I'll be able to prove myself. I'll be able to have the authority and the voice that I want to have in my job or in my industry. Would you share a little bit about why you decided to make that shift?
Well, at the time I was in the entertainment industry. This was like the early 2000s. So it was kind of still like the wild, wild west. And I was at a place in my life that I was working for a movie producer, and at a place in my life that if I didn't pull my shit together, I probably wasn't going to end up where I wanted to be. My life was quickly going down the tubes. I was drinking a lot. I was not in the right headspace. And a lot of it had to do with the environment that I was in. Could I have kept going and been successful in the entertainment industry? Yes, because I have a ton of grit and I am a go-getter and like I can make it happen. But I looked at my life 5 years from then and I was like, this does not look good to me. I could already see where I was headed. And so I had to make that very quick decision. It was like ripping off the Band-Aid. I was like, no, I have to be done. But I always had a passion for nutrition. And so I kind of found this safe landing going back to school. And at the time it was perfect for me. It was perfect to leave that industry because it wasn't serving me and I wasn't happy, and move towards learning about something I truly loved. And then, look at where that took me into with the cannabis industry, which is so random, but like looking back, all those pieces like really perfectly fell into place. So I feel like if you're looking to make a move, I feel like you have to look at your life 5 to 10 years out. Will you be happy in that industry? Yes, of course. I'm sure you can get that promotion and move forward, but will that ultimately give you satisfaction? Ultimate happiness and contentment.
Yeah. So, okay. Starting businesses, running businesses, there's so much personal growth that takes place in people. Would you share with us something that maybe it's one particular thing or something that you've learned over the years about just yourself and how you function or how you've grown?
That's a really great question. I've really prioritized my personal and professional growth throughout the years. I work with an executive coach and take it very, very seriously. I would say, one of the things that I've really worked on over the years is showing up as my true self and not showing up with kind of this mask on, right? Of, okay, well, now I'm walking into my office and now I'm a CEO and now I'm taking my mask off and now I'm a mom. And that really being transparent and being your true self is actually what elevates you as a leader and as an entrepreneur. And so I don't have this kind of stop and start of who I am. And I was doing that for a really long time and found out actually that doesn't behoove me. And so now I show up as my true self at home and at the office. And that has completely changed the way I interact with my employees, the way I interact with my investors. And it's been a huge growth for me.
Have you noticed any difference in the way that people respond to you when you feel like you're really your true self and when you're not?
They're very honest. I can definitely get people to tell me a lot of things because they feel like they can.
Yeah.
They know that I'm listening.
That.
Yeah. They know I'm listening. They know they're heard and they're seen. And for employees to feel that way, I think that really helps build a tremendous organization.
What do you think is a couple of the keys to the success that you've had you've had two companies, so either, just Willow or both of them, but what are some of the keys to success that you've noticed?
I would say one of the biggest keys is consistency. I like to say consistency over intensity. I am very consistent. I show up every single day. I am a consistent leader. I am a consistent partner. We ebb and flow through emotional fluctuations, of course, and I am not immune to being emotional and having those feelings. And I definitely feel all the feels, but I am very consistent. And I think that helps to build a strong organization. And I've learned that in my juice company. I think I was like all over the place. I was, kind of grasping on to like, well, I'm a new entrepreneur here. I can do all these things, but that actually doesn't work. And so being consistent, and also in cannabis, you have to be willing to pick yourself up when shit gets tough, because this industry is not easy and it's very rare that you get second chances. So you have to stay true to yourself and I think have a tremendous amount of strength.
When you're talking about consistency, it sounds like you're talking about both a sense of emotional consistency and how you process your day or go through your day or something like that. Is that, am I right? Is it both those things?
Yeah, I think you said it right on. It's emotional consistency, not being super affected by the highs and not being super affected by the lows. The highs are great. Like you got a great client, you won this project, whatever. But instead of like, celebrating that and like keep celebrating that, then being super affected when you lose someone, lose a key employee or lose one of your biggest clients, and knowing that that's not the end. To keep going. And so I've been able to modulate my emotions around these things much better than I ever have in the past. And then also it's showing up every day and being here to support the team and showing them, yes, you're grinding right along there with them.
So when the pandemic hit, how many employees did you have at that time?
The pandemic, I think I had like 15 or 16.
Yeah. And then you grew. What have you noticed about how your leadership has had to shift in the past couple of years?
Well, I've always been very adamant that our team works from our offices. I think, having a cohesive team here to brainstorm and work closely together really benefits the organization that I want to build. I had to, of course, be very flexible in that when COVID hit, because like my team couldn't be here. And I had to find ways to engage with them via virtual worlds. via Zoom. And that was really hard for me. That was hard for me to pivot to that because I was so used to having this very collaborative environment. So I had to work on that. I really had to work on that. But I think we found very creative ways to continue to stay very connected.
What were some of those creative ways?
Yeah. I mean, we would eat lunch together. Not every day, but a couple times a week, we would eat lunch together via Zoom because during the pandemic, cannabis was exempt. So my husband and I continue to come to the office in our warehouse every day because we have a big flex space. So a big office space and then warehouse on the back. And my engineering team continued to come because we were still deploying systems. I mean, at that point, now everyone was like, very concerned about germs, and we have systems that get rid of all of that. So there was an incredible amount of demand for Willow at that time, and of course still is, but at that time it was pretty intense. So we continued to come to the office, but most of the team was not here. So anyway, we would support, of course, the guys here. We would have lunch via Zoom. I sent my team little treats throughout the months that they were home. But once the pandemic work at home was lifted, my whole team did come back to the office.
Mm. And as far as the team and how they've processed everything, the pandemic and just the way that it's impacted people, have you noticed a difference in the way that you're needing to show up for people, or is it just kind of highlighted who you already were?
I think it highlighted who I already was. However, I've really had to I really had to prioritize having healthy and happy employees. You know, it's an interesting concept. It's like, is your priority your customer, or is your priority and the happiness is your employee? And I realized very quickly it's the employee, because if I have happy and healthy employees, then I'm going to have that same type of customer. So I kind of like pivoted my thinking, because I was, your customer, always customer centric. And then I was like, wait, is that actually working for us? And so I started prioritizing the employees. And I think it made a really big difference, prioritizing their mental health. How can we support you here? What do you guys need? And being open, transparent, listening, being empathetic, and then really treating others the same way you expect to be treated. I very much stand by that.
What are 2 or 3 things that you think CEOs probably need to be focused on at the stage of the pandemic? Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that CEOs should, one, be focused on the employees. I believe that through the pandemic, we went through a huge mental health crisis. And so how can we support these employees that were more affected than others? I know that hybrid work is something that's super desirable right now. So how can CEOs and employers support the needs of employees? I mean, there's a few of our team members that prefer to do a little more hybrid. And while I was very against that before the pandemic, I've had to, kind of become a little softer on that. I think it's also really important to look at, where we are as a world community. There's still a lot of uncertainty. So instead of, I think everyone's like, kind of burst out of the doors of this pandemic and ready to like get on with their lives. But I still think we proceed with caution. I mean, we're hearing COVID cases rising in New York and, the unrest in Russia and Ukraine. I think there's still uncertainty that, cash is queen, I like to say, right now. And so, holding off on kind of more lavish spending, and ensuring that you still have a strong runway, because we're not kind of out of the woods.
What is your number one challenge as a CEO in 2022?
I would say my number one challenge is hiring. Hiring has been, we're in super growth phase. Like I mentioned, we closed our Series A. And so we're bringing on a lot of team members. And I am finding it challenging to bring in highly skilled, qualified, and, ready to work employees. So we've had to look a little deeper. We've had to try a little harder. There isn't just kind of this robust platform of tons of, ready to work employees.
Mm-hmm. When you say look a little deeper, what are you referring to?
Well, I think in the past we had relied on some of these employee hiring platforms,
Mm.
like a LinkedIn, like some of the other ones out there, and we've had to really look to using highly skilled recruiters. Excuse me.
Mm.
Using recruiters has been, something we've moved towards. We haven't had to do that. I mean, there's always with cannabis, everyone wants to get into cannabis. And so it's been easy to find awesome people. But now I think, a lot of people are back at work and have jobs. And so we're kind of, having to work a little harder to find really good people.
What do you think one of the greatest opportunities is for a company like yours in 2022?
I mean, cannabis is so interesting. There is just a tremendous amount of growth and opportunity kind of at your fingertips. And so we're capitalizing on that. But on the flip side, cannabis kind of moves at a slower pace because there's so many regulations. But like I mentioned, we're in super growth mode. So, I mean, we have a huge amount of opportunity. We're developing and innovating our system right now. And so I think, putting out a new product that's the best of the best is something that we're really looking forward to.
Okay, so I've got a couple more questions for you. First of all, how can people learn more about Willow Industries and what you're doing, or who you are, and what you do some podcast interviews and things like that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, you could certainly go to our website, willowindustries.com to learn more about what we do. I mean, I always appreciate people reaching out. I think it's always interesting to talk to others that are interested in getting into cannabis. I appreciate being a mentor to other women that are looking to start their entrepreneurial journey or looking to start their career, whether it's in cannabis or another industry. So I appreciate people reaching out to me. And I mean, certainly like I'm active on social media.
Okay, so a voice of influence develops their voice. They clarify their mission. They build into their team. For somebody who wants to be a voice of influence in the world, in their company, what last piece of advice would you want to give them?
I would say honestly, I really think it's treating other people the way you want to be treated. I believe that begets you becoming an influencer and someone that people look towards. If you are a kind person that treats others with respect, I really believe that gets you places that you wouldn't necessarily get if you were using different tactics. I am tough and I am straightforward and I am very transparent, but I'm also very empathetic and understanding, and I am a listener. And I really think that's helped me get to the place I am today, but it's also helped me build a really incredible team.
Hmm. Thank you so much for being a voice of influence today for our listeners. Appreciate it, Jill.
Thank you so much.